Hi, this is Eli Ochiltree of the SnoKing Beekeepers Association. It's May 21st, 2025, and this is our monthly meeting. We're going to have a presentation on pollen digestion in the eusocial organism, which slide you should see up on your screen if I shared screen correctly. But before that, is there anything that people would like to announce, something going on, something they're looking for? And we have the chat, and that was really helpful. Rachel was just saying that she's is interested in voltometers. Okay, do it yourself.
Voltometers.
Okay, and also in long hive design is actually building some, and we need people ask me maybe once a month, do you know who makes long hives or has really good plans? And honestly, only person I know of is Dave Ledger over in, I think, the Key Peninsula Club makes them. And does anyone else have any other ideas? Fred
If
Dunn has a set of plans. What did you find, Rachel?
I talked to the gentleman you recommended, and he is extremely expensive.
Well, it depends on whether he wants to be bothered. And if you're out of the blue and don't know him, that's possible. But and it is a specialized custom item. And I don't know why, because there's enough of us that are starting to think twice about lifting heavy boxes that a long hive starts to sound really attractive. It has some of its own issues when you actually work with one throughout all the seasons, but it's workable. It's a workable solution for people who are just not able to lift more than like 10 pounds at a time. It is a solution. People with bad backs, shoulders, bad knees, any number of reasons. You want to share it with someone who has physical limitations also. Any other requests for information? You're looking for something? On the in the newsletter, I put a lot of announcements there. Beginner starts in July, the day before the 4th, the 3rd, Thursday the 3rd. Kind of an odd time, but we need to finish before our almost 2 weeks that we spend at the Monroe Fair. And then apprentice starts the 8th, Tuesday the 8th. So read that through if you're interested in classes. If you can't do either of those set times or any set times, there is kind of a self-study option. Call me and I'll explain. The apprentice is important because you need to have that certificate in hand before you do your service credit for journeyman. It's one of the requirements that WASBA has. So if you have any questions on that, go ahead and call me, um, email me. I try to figure out what you're saying by text, but sometimes it is complicated and I have to talk to you or we can talk by email. Oh, and we are looking for outreach people, and Heidi very graciously put her phone number in the newsletter, and she said she would handle some of the outreach. We have a wonderful opportunity to do outreach on select Saturdays, like a half dozen Saturdays throughout the entire summer. So not every Saturday in Woodinville at the Lavender Farm there. And it is a wonderful opportunity right in our area, in SnoKing area. We should be able to contact a lot of people who keep plants, farm, garden, have an interest in bees. It would be a great place to talk to the public. Unfortunately, for example, I am at the apiary every Saturday that they're asking for because just about every Saturday during the summer, we have the apiary as open as we can. We're even doing the 10 to noon beginner. I think the weather will be good enough this Saturday. Last Saturday was basically canceled due to rain. The queen rearing workshop takes 12 to 3. And then later in the summer, we will have at least one workshop where we do the Harbo assay and the UBO assay that Rex Robertson came and talked to our club about. So, are there any other announcements? If you think of them while I'm talking, you want someone to contact you about something, put it in the chat. I will try to get through this presentation as quickly as I can. I can't do it in the time I'm supposed to. As I was telling people right before we started recording, this is actually one of the parts of a 3-part final exam series that you take to complete the Cornell Master Series. And it is necessary to do an oral, a field, and a written exam. And in some ways, this is the hardest one because it's a 15-minute presentation. I am not going to get this done in 15 minutes. This is my rough draft, but I'd appreciate some feedback, especially on how I can streamline this. I think I am repeating myself in my rough draft, but let me go through the material. And it's really interesting material. I was really fascinated by this subject. It takes pollen a step deeper. It's a layer below what we experience all the time as beekeepers and what we know already as beekeepers. So go ahead and use the chat even while I'm talking, and I'll start the presentation, the rough draft thereof. I'm supposed to deliver the final draft on Monday. The topic is pollen digestion in a eusocial organism. What a beekeeper needs to know or understand. Oh dear. Screen adjustment, sorry there. Part of pollen digestion is very visible to beekeepers. We look out at the forage, we watch our bees come loaded with their pollen baskets in, and we keep an eye on that. So foraging collection, we know quite a bit about. And then we continue to watch pollen in what are really probably the first steps of pollen digestion, if you include forage and collection, when the bees put it into bee bread. And we watch to see the different colors. Are the bees getting a variety? We are concerned about quantity and diversity because we want the bees to have the maximum nutrition available to them that they can gather. We look to see where that bee bread is being stored in the hive. The ring right around that compact brood nest in the upper right-hand picture, beautiful. And it's right where the bees need it. The bees are putting it where the bees that will consume it the fastest and the most are the nurse bees. 3 to 5, 7 days of age, nurse bees consume the most pollen per day that they will. They are the nurse bees are the largest consumers of pollen in the hive. Now, remembering that a nurse bee eventually ages on to other duties and eventually forager. So we are watching that. Oh, and then when we see entire frames of bee bread, that also tells us that the colony is healthy, maybe short on nectar, and that's why they are filling entire frames of pollen. But we're watching all the time. We're watching to see if our larvae look wet or dry. If they look dry, a lot of us say, okay, it's time to feed. It can be a rain dearth or a pollen dearth during the summer. The bees are not getting enough coming in. So feeding pollen supplement, which is not as good as fresh pollen. Even fresh pollen is much better than stale pollen. For a long time, it was thought that bee bread was really highly nutritious, more nutritious than fresh pollen. Researchers are finding that the opposite is true, that actually nurse bees prefer fresh pollen, and fresh pollen is 76% more stimulating to nurse bees in the development of their hyperpharyngeal glands, in the size and in the production of jelly from those glands. But when I do this, I like to monitor. I'm feeding pollen, and on the slide out board, if they crumble it up and throw it out, and they are tossing it out of their hive, they don't want it, they don't need it. They're not accepting my pollen sub. Probably they're not in dearth. The other thing we watch on pollen digestion is we worry about the indigestibles, especially in pollen sub. And when we see the fecal spotting, we're watching for that. So this is a lot that we do with pollen. That's all visible, but there's a totally invisible, much more set of functions that pollen digestion performs. It actually controls everything in the hive. Pollen is the main source of virtually all nutrients except for carbs. When it comes to carbs, the simple carbs, the simple sugars, then nectar is king. I've always heard from the start of being a beekeeper that protein was the most important thing in pollen. Well, no, because it is actually the source of all the major, except for carbohydrates, all major macronutrients, and even most of the micronutrients. It is basically the source of virtually everything except those simple sugars in nectar and some trace, but even the trace elements in nectar are usually found in pollen, much more than pollen. It's lipids, it's fats, the lipids, the fats and sterols. It is all, I'm forgetting something. Pollen, lipids and fats, carbohydrates, and then all the vitamins, minerals, and elements such as iron, calcium, sulfur, all the biogenic elements that is needed in digestion for an animal body. We know that good nutrition is important. A colony can't develop and can't reproduce, and we need colonies to develop, grow, and reproduce so we can make splits. We know that nutrition is good for every animal, for its immune defense and its general health. And in bees, we especially gauge that by overwintering and survival. Good nutrition in the fall, fat bodies on our winter bees. That's a topic of a lot of talks that we're hearing recently in beekeeping circles. And the truth is, we can't control an awful lot of what our bees are exposed to. Bees are the true free-range livestock. We can't control what they come into contact with, but we can offset it with the best nutrition we can give them, and that is nutrition resilience. Now, in talking about pollen digestion, you might think it just happens in the little midgut of the bee. This is digestion by a eusocial organism, not just by the individual bee. Pollen and its digestion and its products move through the colony. They are processed in stages, stored, some reserves kept, and then distributed to all members as needed. And bees do this with an incredible eusocial efficiency using those age-driven behavioral casts, the progression from emergence to death as a worn-out forager. The midgut, though, a lot of people think that in the midgut of the bee is where pollen gets digested. Actually, the result of pollen digestion in the midgut is mostly indigestible nutrient molecules, and they're in really poor ratios. Luckily, bees have in their gut, just as we do, gut microbiota that can break down molecules that we can't. Now, they take some of that for their own use. But while they're doing that, the mutualistic relationship between the gut microbiota and the worker bee is such that the germination pore or the shell is digested, degraded by all their enzymatic action, not by the enzymatic action of the bee gut, the midgut. Yes, bees can secrete some enzymes, but nothing like what is needed to breach the outer shell of pollen. That outer shell is full of indigestibles, polysaccharides like fiber and starches, lipids, some of which actually are necessary to bees and essential. Bees can't make them, and sterols, some of which bees cannot make. And the interior is just about as indigestible. So how in the world do bees live off pollen when they can't digest it? Well, the digestive system of a bee colony is much like the digestive system of a human. A human is, in a way, a eusocial organism, a superorganism. All of our cells depend on a system of digestion. The same for the bees. But the part that we think of as analogous is the midgut of the bee to the duodenum, small intestine, maybe part of the large intestine. And that's just the start of the story. There are other mammalian analogies, and I'm going to kind of push them through this presentation. Pollen digestion is movement, processing, storage, and distribution of those pollen digestion products. And the movement goes from the bee bread to the midgut. Nutrients are absorbed by the hemolymph. Some are stored in the fat bodies, and some arrive at the hypopharyngeal glands, from where they are distributed by young nurse bees to all the bees in the hive, including the larvae. And this is like in a mammalian body. The food is ingested at the mouth, passes through the intestines, nutrients are released into the blood, stored in the liver, and with the mammary glands, the young are fed. The processing happens much the same way. There are enzymes at these various stages and processing. In the bees, it's the same as basically mammalian. There's salivary enzymes, midgut enzymes, and the gut microbiota that helps the bee is actually very analogous to mammalian gut microbiota. The fat body is the closest thing we have to a liver. If you notice, bees don't have a liver, and they don't have a pancreas. These perform vital functions. The closest I can give you to those specialized organs is what the fat body does. It does many of the functions of a mammalian liver. And it also stores, as a liver does, a lot of nutrients. Then these pollen digestion products need to get distributed, just as every cell in a mammalian body needs its share of digestive products. Every bee in the colony needs to get its share of those pollen digestion products, mostly through the hypopharyngeal glands, also the hemolymph, but mainly through the direct contact with the nurse bees. Trophallaxis is shown in that picture. So we're going from movement to processing to storage to distribution. That is the way pollen is really digested. The behavioral casts increase the efficiency of all of this in a way that rivals the mammalian system of digestion. It starts with the wetting of the pollen, which is believed to hydrate the germination pore so that it's a little easier for the gut microbiota to get in there, breach it, get in, start dissolving, digesting the outer shell coating, and then getting into the inside of the shell, the outer shell of the pollen, each pollen grain. All the bees are more efficient because they don't have to do all the steps of pollen digestion. Newly emerged bees, up to 3 days, are cleaning cells. After that, they go into the development of the hypopharyngeal glands as nurse bees, and they feed pollen, especially up to day 9 post-emergence. The peak of the hypopharyngeal glands development is at day 6, approximately, but especially when there's a need, nurse bees will keep working their hypopharyngeal glands and feeding the rest of the hive. Another important aspect of pollen digestion that I was a little surprised by, the lipids that are needed for wax production come from pollen digestion. And that's important because I was always told as a beekeeper that it was really the feeding of 1-to-1 syrup that made the difference. That's what increased wax production in the spring. Don't forget those lipids. After all, wax is a combination of quite a number of molecules, some of which are lipids. And of course, there are young bees receiving from the foragers and storing everything. This specialization actually means that every worker bee does their task better. And they can do it better because a lot of the digestion is handled by only one behavioral caste, the worker bees. And when hypopharyngeal glands of the worker bees are producing this superfood jelly, it optimizes the progressive feeding of larvae, which not most insects do not even do. And even the ones that don't do it to the extent that the nurse bees do. In that jelly, there is optimal nutrition, and it is stoichiometrically adjusted. That means the correct ratios of amino acids and to some extent lipids and carbs and everything for the larvae and also for worker bees. It's very efficient. Nobody gets too much. Nobody gets it too little. The pollen digestion has to be stored and it creates reserves. When you have reserves, the colony can ensure continuous distribution. Storage makes a continuous supply and therefore a continuous distribution possible. It does this with moderating nutrient concentrations in the hemolymph. The presence of pollen and of pollen digestion products alone does that. Then that storage is not simply random throw it in the closet storage. All the molecules that are stored in fat bodies and even to a little extent in hypopharyngeal glands are in the correct stoichiometry, the correct ratios in the amounts that are needed. There's a lot of food security in that storage of intermediates of pollen digestion. It makes possible continuous distribution to colony members of that final product, the jelly. And there's a lot of nutritional resilience in having storage and reserves. The homeostasis of the bee colony requires this kind of efficiency. How are you going to keep your brood at 92 to 94 degrees, especially in the temperate zones? It requires an efficiency of a metabolism that is, to me, mind-boggling. Pollen digestion makes the molecules that are present in the bee, individual bees, and in the colony stay within the ranges of concentrations, the maximum and the minimum concentrations, and ratios that are needed by the colony while they're being processed, stored, and distributed. Just as we can't have too much glucose without getting too high blood sugar or too much cholesterol without having high cholesterol and having health problems, the same thing is really true of the bee colony. This is especially true in the hypopharyngeal glands. You would think that pollen would come after 90 million years of coevolution between the plants that produce pollen and the bees that consume it. You would think that there would be a close match. There isn't. There are far more non-essential amino acids than the essential amino acids. Essential meaning the bee cannot synthesize them and must get them from the diet, from the plant. But when that ratio is perfect, it allows larvae to be fed progressively at a rate that they outdo any other form of larval growth that I know of, and greatly increasing the efficiency of the growth of the entire colony. And because some bees are now freed from that production of jelly, they can be more efficient at their jobs up through foraging. The gut bacteria do far more than just break down the pollen grains. They take some of those molecules that they liberate and change them. For example, polysaccharides into fatty acids. They even give off some glucose. They also consume molecules that are indigestible to bees. They actually take nitrogenous waste when you break down amino acids, nucleic acids, quite a number of other molecules in digestion, you end up with toxic nitrogen in the system of the animal that's digesting. Gut bacteria can turn that into urea and make it, therefore, less toxic to bees. The fat body storage. It's incredible what the fat body stores. It doesn't just store glucose. It does it in a very efficient form as glycogen. It keeps the triglycerides, the vitellogenins, the phospholipids needed for cell membranes, and stores in proportions to each other what is needed by the bee. This is an example of how the amino acid balance in pollen of different plants doesn't really help the bees. Some plants are really good. To the right-hand side, we have the most essential amino acids, and then over the next most essential, and then the totally non-essential. Actually, as I said, non-essential is far more common in protein in pollen in most plants than the essential. Some are outstanding, some aren't. Outstanding is red on this. Useless is blue. I put the common names over the side, although I know people won't have time to read them. This was a very interesting paper. I mentioned fat bodies and that the storage is very specific and it is stoichiometrically balanced what the bee is going to need in the future. And in young bees, the fat bodies are large and then they gradually disappear. On the right-hand side of this picture is a young bee's fat bodies, as opposed to on the left-hand side, an older bee's fat bodies. As they are being used up, and older bees no longer, foragers, no longer need fat bodies. They're not generating jelly through hyperpharyngeal glands. They're not providing the rest of the colony with food. They are getting it in the form of jelly from the younger bees. I think I'll skip this slide. This is sort of my wind-up slide. I want to ask everyone to look at it schematically. This is actually a schematic that was used to show how deprivation, nutrient deficiencies affected a hive. But it can also be used, the schematic, to show how colonies pass nutrition from the colony as a whole to the adults. Then adults, nurse bees feed the larvae, then the larvae grow up well nourished to become the adults that can now contribute to the hive. And then those adults continue to contribute to the colony, especially in foraging. And it goes in a circle. There are loops in this. The colony processes as a whole, processes, stores, and distributes. Then that is provided to adults and by adults to other adults, the nurse bees to the larvae. But then well-fed larvae make well-functioning adults. And that means that this loop continues with well-fed adults, meaning you have a well-fed, well-functioning, with a great immune defense system, bees. The total of what I'm saying is that pollen digestion in a eusocial organism includes not just that little bit in the midgut, not even necessarily what we think of as digestion, but for a bee colony, it is a movement through the entire colony. There's processing in different stages, different behavioral cast stages of different bees. Storage, again, is different in different parts, different individuals at any set point in time in the colony. And the ones that are distributing to all the members as needed will become the members that are needed eventually. It is a big loop, a big circle. It's incredible. There is an incredible efficiency to it because the bee colony is taking advantage of the age-driven behavioral casts. This is the part of pollen digestion that's not visible to beekeepers, but it's absolutely integral to colony health and to understanding it. I'd like to see more research done, especially one author recommended that we do research and try to establish the complete dietary requirements for bees. Think the packaging on a vitamin bottle with the minerals, and perhaps we could have this, know what honeybees need, And then if they're missing something, be able to offer them the correct nutrients, sort of a la carte, as needed. I'd like to see in the research that we establish this by doing less research with bees that are caged and more in the colony testing and research out in the field. And we do need to know more about lipids because they are, although I was always told that protein was the main thing that pollen contributed, lipids are extremely important and a lot of other nutrients as well. That is all I really have to say. Thank you very much for listening to it. I don't have a bibliography yet. I'll stop there. And I don't know, did I do that in anywhere near probably about 30 minutes? Now, that's supposed to be a 15-minute presentation. Colleen signed on and she's going to give me some feedback. Anybody else's feedback? I think I have a lot of duplication in there. Are there places where I didn't say something well enough? I think I repeated myself and I'll get some of that out this weekend. Could you follow it though? If you know something about bees, and this is supposed to be for people who are keeping bees already. That's the level it's supposed to be on. And we can just go to talking about our bees. Okay, Colleen, Colleen took notes and will talk to me tomorrow. It needs a lot of work. This is the rough draft, I know. Hey, usually you get my rough draft right before the meeting. I mean, that's all the best you get. So this is going to be, by Monday, this will be so polished, right? Heidi, you're on here. If no one has questions, you're welcome to send me comments too. When you think about it, where was I missing something? And where did, that's overkill. That's too much. People don't need to know that much. If you want to send me notes or call or email, that's great. Text. Where did I miss the point completely and not tell you something? But Heidi's on here, and Heidi is sort of being outreach chair.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, good. Okay. Your paper, are you going to get down to the final draft before you publish it then, or?
I Monday. It's Monday at noon, I think.
Monday?
I'm supposed to present this in 15 minutes, just sounding like I really know what I'm talking about. No hesitation, no money eyeing.
Absolutely. You got this. That's
Right.
right.
No problem.
Did we want to talk about any outreach now or?
While everyone's still here, yes, because there's
Okay.
that one thing in Woodinville. I really wish if it wasn't every Saturday in the apiary, that lavender farm, the select Saturdays sounds like such a good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right in our area. Oh, okay. For people who don't understand the economic significance of working at staffing a booth at some kind of public event and being invited to do it for free. Heidi, what does it run for a booth at the farmers markets, for example?
Holy cow, on the cheap seat side, it's $35. On the more elaborate side, what they're asking, it's like $100. What they're asking is $100 sort of thing. So cheap seats are like for $35. But yeah.
That's you bring everything yourself? Is that what you mean by a cheap
Yeah,
seat? A little
yeah, the
10 by
cheap
10?
Yeah, 10 by 10. That's as big as you get. And you bring if you want to bring it to, if you don't have a table and you need a table, that's another $10. If you need electrical hookups, that's another, I think, $20 for electrical hookups. So depends on what your need is. If you need a bigger 10 by 10, so $35 for each 10 by 10. So if your space requires you to go larger, then, it's another $35. So, and that's just like the bare minimum. So, like I said, I only sign up for a couple $100 farmers markets. I don't sign up for many because I think that's ridiculous. And then on the other side of it too, if you are selling anything from a food perspective, you have to have a license of some sort. So you don't have to have a food handler's license, but you do have to have a license. So I've got all of that put together, but and then also they have so it's never happened to me, but the folks that put the events on, they let you know sometimes the FDA or maybe the USDA or somebody, an inspector is going to show up and inspect your booth if you have any food products. So you got to be prepared to have your business license and everything that they require from you. So that's never happened to me. So, but they do let you know if there's going to be an inspection or if there's going to be somebody there that's going to be walking through the booths. So, so it typically for a setup, it's $35 on the cheap side if you have your tent and table, but if you don't, it goes up from there. So, yeah. I've never gone outside of the 10 by 10 space. I've been able to contain everything within a 10 by 10 space. And so I don't see any reason to go outside of that.
So you're getting rates that are cheaper than I'm here like in King County. So you're out in Snohomish County?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, that's part of it. I was going to say, because it's a lot higher. People have asked me, why don't you show up at this
Well, and again, it all
Snohomish
depends.
Mall,
If
whatever. Yeah.
like the Everett Mall, they have a fundraiser type farmers market at the mall once a year, and that's $100. And then they have the Everett farmers market, which is huge. It's a huge gathering. It's a huge event. And then they also have the Edmonds, and they're $100. So and it's all contingent on how popular that event is. So I tend to go to the smaller markets because that basically puts me as the most likely the only honey vendor there, and they'll let you know if there's more than one beekeeping.
Are you still there, Heidi? Your audio cut out. Did you bump your mute
Honey vendor
button?
type an additional space that's going to be there or not. No.
Okay, you're there.
Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, my computer decided to act up because I had a meeting tonight.
Okay. I didn't want to spend too time, but really that lavender farm one is really nice. And the other thing is if you go to these and they're the wrong kind of event, you're not going to meet people who are potential beekeepers. Anything that's gardening, farming, homesteading, environmental, you're more likely to meet beekeepers, I think.
Yeah,
Potential
and
beekeepers.
they don't like to have more than one, so they'll let you know, no, we already have a honey vendor, so
Mm-hmm.
you're not gonna, you know, we only need one honey vendor, and if it's not you, it's not you. So if they've selected another honey vendor, so but if the event is big
Okay.
enough, they spread everybody out. You get your assigned seating or your assigned tent value. So
It's complicated.
it
I'm not sure about the results.
there are rules and regulations, definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it just you try to make yourself unique and informative and knowledgeable. And the folks that coordinate the event, they know what they're doing. They're really good and they know what they're doing, and they make sure everybody's safe, and they're pretty good about coming around your tent if you're the only person in your space. Like, do you need a bathroom break, or can I get you some water? Or they're really good
That's sweet.
about that. I just,
Okay.
because sometimes I do go by myself and it's like, oh, this is going to be a long day.
Well, so Heidi is doing the outreach coordinating, and I didn't list the Saturdays exactly. It is odd Saturdays at the Lavender Farm, but there's other things that come up, like the Thursday occasional Duval Farmers Market, but that's a free one, 501(c)(3). You may only get called once or twice the entire summer. Okay, Rachel has a hand up. So Rachel, did you want anything particular?
I was going to offer two marketing suggestions. My interest is, and I won't make it this year, but next year, if I have some hives and we put them out, say at your place, and I get some honey out of the deal, my plan is to take the honey, put it in mason jars or something like that, drop it off at my synagogue, and have people buy it through the synagogue. I don't get anything out of it, but it makes a donation to my synagogue. And that in Judaism, that's a big thing for Rosh Hashanah, because you break your Rosh Hashanah fast with dipping slices of apple into honey, and it's for a sweet new year. So if any of you are Jewish, that may be a way of paying your dues for the synagogue, is by paying your dues in honey instead of in card hold cash as a donation. The Russian Greek Orthodox churches are an interesting. They don't necessarily go in for the honey, but they have a requirement in their religious rules to, they burn candles. The candles have to be at least 51% beeswax, and most of them have decided that the hell with that, they're going 100% beeswax, because paraffin candles in a church like that, where you have very expensive painting icons written on the ceiling and all over the place, the paraffin makes after 5 to 8 years makes the place sooty, and you've got to go do an intensive cleaning and restoration of all the icons. And so they want to use only pure beeswax candles. And so that is a marketplace that you might consider exploiting. What I know has been done in several Orthodox churches that I was a member before I converted to Judaism is they would take all of the stems, the unburnt stuff, put it in a box and return it for credit on the next box of candles. The candles have certain specific sizes to fit holders sometimes not, because they have a sandbox they stick them in. So, but those are two suggestions for marketing. Sorry I took so long.
Well, thank you. I'm starting to look at the chat too, but thanks for that. And yes, honey has been a long-standing tradition to pay debts and tribute and such in honey, going back farther back than ancient Egyptian times. Anything else? I know people are starting to sign off. If there's any questions, and you have to leave early, because I know it's still beautiful outside. And I thought it'd be raining tonight, have lots of people come listen to me fumble through my first draft. The
Well,
long hives.
we
Yeah.
do have some events coming up. We've got the Lavender Farm. We need to solidify a little bit more information around that. You said the Duval. Do you know what the date is for the Duval?
No, it's a last minute, tell you like a week before.
Oh, that's
And
great.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, that's why I ended up going. And my husband actually filled in for me the last hour and a half last
Sure.
Thursday, because I had to come back and do the Thursday
Oh,
Queen
wow.
Workshop planning meeting, which I do tomorrow night also. I could update a
Then
little. Yeah.
on June 4th, we have the Hawthorne Elementary Garden Club. And
Mhm.
that is on I had it in my calendar, but it's during the weekday, not the weekend. So the Lavender Farm in Duval will be a weekend event. But then the Hawthorne Garden Club, the elementary school, that's on 6/4, and that's during the weekday. So, I
That
did,
one was fun, if that's the one I remember. And then Pat
yeah,
did it with
that,
you last year. That's fun
those
because it's
kids were
kind of
really
different
engaged.
ages and
Yeah.
it's after school and they all want to talk and they all know something about bees and you're just wonderful because you're a beekeeper and came. If your ego needs a little boosting,
Oh,
I
yeah.
yeah.
It is a lot of fun. There is a gentleman, was it Kobe? Kobe said he was available to do the farmers,
Oh,
the
I will get,
Duval.
yeah, I think I know which Kobe. Yes, can you email me and I'll get it to you or even text me and I'll get you his, if he said he's
Okay.
available, that's great.
Yeah, he says he's available. We just need a date or a
Yeah,
contact from Duval so we can go ahead and get that off
yeah.
your
It
plate, coordinate
it's
that.
last minute, so I need
Yeah.
like several names, and then I just call you and you say nope, can't do it. And
Okay.
especially with the good weather coming,
Okay.
but it's Duval 2 to 7, and and I could start.
He said it's on
Well,
a Thursday starting in June.
mm-hmm.
Is that in July? Okay.
Well, what's starting in
Said he would
June?
be able to, he'd be able to help with the Duval Farmers Market.
Yeah, that's the sporadic one.
Okay.
The lavender we have the dates for.
Okay.
And I can send those. And they start like June 20th, 21st. So
Okay.
after school is out, so it's good for that. It's should be good weather by then and settled.
Okay.
It wasn't
Okay.
too rainy last
Yeah.
Thursday.
Gosh, I hope we're getting through this rainy stuff.
Oh, I hope
Mm.
so, because this is late, but when it rains late, then the blackberry flow has enough water to keep going, enough water in the ground, right? Think positive thoughts.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. And then the bees, they really like the day after rain anyways. They're out there in the soil
Oh,
and going after all the nutrients and stuff. Oh, can you
oh,
hear me now?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I don't know what's going on with this thing. Oh, it probably needs to sleep. Um,
Okay, the hives. Scott Hill, I'm gonna have to try to get in touch with him about, he was interested in making long hives. We need somebody, a local source, to make long hives. There's just enough demand for them. The wood's really expensive, I know, especially if you get that thicker, a lot of long hives, you're making it like out of 2x6s or 2x12s, something that's that thicker, not just that thin wood shell that does let out the heat so fast. So I didn't get back to Scott in time. I meant to. Okay. Okay. Scott said he followed. Okay, people are being gracious about it, but I like Colleen's going to help me skinny it down. But then I need more details in other places. Okay. Yeah, all kinds of hive designs are out there. Charlie put a nice comment. It's a challenging topic, pollen digestion, but it was really interesting when I started thinking about it. I've always been told it was just protein. Rachel, Rachel Lee, Rachel put in the comment about the hive that you could sleep on top of. Okay, you have to look it up if you haven't seen the design for this. It is considered very therapeutic to lie down and relax on top of a hive of bees and have the hum and the buzz. Okay, okay, Richard's right there. You're volunteering. You gonna build one for us? Hey, we could rent it out. Wouldn't that be the greatest fundraiser? I love it. That's gonna be our fundraiser. We need one for next year that's gonna generate some money. Ooh, I love
I
it.
was I was just talking to one of my coworkers last week about that.
You know, if nothing else, it would be such a curiosity. People would just come to see it. That would be kind of
Yep.
fun. It would be a long hive. Yeah. And the heat, the warmth, it's incredible, the warmth that comes off. And a long hive, you have a lot of heat loss if you don't put something there. I have two long hives. One has a wool blanket on top of it, and it's like 50% ahead of the other hive. And somebody promised me a wool blanket. I'll have to get a hold of Jameson. He said, "Oh, I got one of those old wool GI surplus blankets. I would love to have another one or two of those. If anybody's got old wool blankets, but now that I've told you, you know now what the perfect even if it gets wet, it'll absorb moisture, but it will also stay warm when it absorbs moisture because that is what wool does. That's its great. That's why wool stayed for so long as outdoor clothing and outdoor and uniforms for people who military and such working outside. Don't be shy. You are welcome to ask a question. I think, are we past the swarm season? Is everybody feeling like they're past the queen lays everything out and you go, oh, that's nice. She's laid everything out. I'll put a few more frames in. And then you come back a little over a week later and everything's capped over and your hive is going into swarm mode because when the queen laid everything, it all got capped at the same time. And the bees go, oh, population explosion. We're so crowded now. All those bees are going to come out of that capped brood and we're going to be too crowded. And so when you see a whole bunch of capped brood, and especially if the queen has backed off on laying or the workers have backed off on supporting her, which I didn't have time really to in that presentation go into, I'm going to have to leave it out. But it is fascinating that cannibalizing the eggs and the young larvae is a way that the workers control what is going to happen in the hive based on their perception. And it's not democratic, but it's sort of like a consensus. Tom Seeley gets into whether it's a consensus or a quorum, and I get confused every time because he uses them in a slightly different way than I do. But he says that's how swarming decisions and such work. That bees have this way, I say they count. They can count and they can say, okay, all those bees emerge. We're going to need 2 frames for every set of frame of capped brood we have. Okay, they don't say it that way, but they know that when all those bees come out, they're going to be too crowded. And so they can take off before those bees actually come out of the cappings, out from underneath the cappings where that brood is sitting there metamorphosing. It's kind
And
of
also, if they're
neat.
hitting a dearth, they cannibalize just so they
Yep.
don't have to use a bunch of resources on the bees that are about to emerge.
Including rain dearth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually had a screw up in the queen raising workshop, but it worked out great because I can always find something to talk about. So everybody's there and we're doing the grafting last weekend and it turns out that there was a feed problem and the bees didn't get the feed they needed. And when you go into the hives, we're looking for a very specific age to graft, right? Where the queen laid the egg and then it decloses at about 3 days. And then within the next 24 hours after it closes would be ideal to transfer that larva into the little queen cup, either scooping it or getting her to lay in it. Almost all the larvae at exactly that age are missing. We opened up the hives and we're looking, there's eggs standing up. There's eggs laying on their sides. There's older uncapped brood, and exactly the youngest larvae after eclosure weren't there. So we had to hunt around, but it was okay. The bees had perceived dearth. It's raining. Syrup supply was interrupted. My fault. And then what happened was you could find larvae that were still being fed, but the bees always do everything the most efficient way possible. They had to cut back because they didn't have that fake nectar flow, because that's really what syrup is. It's a fake nectar flow, just like a split is a fake swarm, right? We're trying to work with the bees and what they naturally want to do. But it was really interesting. We could find a few larvae exactly the right age, but they were in the center of the brood nest, not on the sides, not on frames that had not yet been laid out, but in between and around the edges, the queen was still laying. So what the workers did was they took care of some of those because they were taking care of older larvae and feeding them right there. So if the queen had come back and filled in where another bee had emerged, or maybe it was a heating hole that's no longer being used. She was laying her eggs everywhere she could. So you had to hunt and pick. It was a very difficult way to graft. It is much easier to put in the entire frame, which I marked where it was on Tuesday, and it had eggs in it. And on Saturday, the eggs were gone, and there was a new set of eggs. This is the bad part. The gap fell exactly when the larvae that would have been that were laid on Tuesday weren't there on Saturday, when they would have been exactly the correct about 4.5 days for grafting. Instead, I had ones that were too young, outright eggs. And just in case anybody ever gets frustrated at grafting, you keep going in and you can't find the right size larvae, and you say, oh, I'll just put some eggs in there. Doesn't work. There's something about when you make your cell builder and you make it hopelessly queenless, that those workers will not mess with eggs. You would think that they would wait until the eggs eclose, hatch. But we're all saying eclose now because we're educated beekeepers and we're up with the times. And we no longer say that eggs hatch. And queens don't hatch, they emerge as adults. Right. That's also eclosion, actually, to go from one stage to another. So the larva actually ecloses into a mature bee, adult bee. But anyway, live and learn. We'll have a second grafting round. We do have some queens. We did look today quickly because we started another cassette and we moved larvae from the cassettes that weren't ready on Saturday. They were ready on Monday. We didn't get to them until Tuesday, but there were a few larvae that were the right exact age, because the queen laid in the center of this little cassette you put her in. She doesn't like it, but she does it, especially if she's a robust, really good queen. And that's what we selected. We're the robust, really good queens. Anything else? Any questions at all? It's good to see you. Mike was out on doing the shifting the few larvae that were grafting age from the cassette where the queen laid in the cups for us. It's really fun. The Queen Workshop is, I'm really kind of think it's really neat that every year it works out and we have a good time getting together. And Darius sent me a whole bunch of pictures. Oh, anybody else who took pictures? I don't think you took pictures, Mike. We need people to take pictures at these workshops because then I can explain better what we saw. We had a good time just looking at frames. One of the cell builders the entrance was not properly reduced. And because there was a shortage of feed, every hive in the yard was looking for a weak one that wasn't guarding the entrance, or the entrance was a little too large. So one got a frame of honey robbed out of it. It was kind of fun to look at a rob out frame, and you could see the raggedy edges and such. That was really neat. Some of the one cell builder, I think it was only one cell builder, didn't have quite enough bees to cover the entire brood nest. And there was the semicircle of the brood nest on the frame. And there were larvae that had just died. I mean, just died on the outside rim of that brood nest, that semicircle you see on your brood frames. But the larvae in the center were fine. The same age, young, it was chill brood. There had been a drop in temperature at night, and there weren't enough bodies with enough energy because of the gap in the feeding to be able to cover the brood and keep it all warm. It was interesting. I don't know if I've ever distinctly seen chill brood. But if you ever don't know why your brood died only on the very edges, and at this time of the year, it can still happen, especially if something is wrong, like your entrance isn't reduced enough. isn't sufficiently insulated. Temperatures are still dropping here on the top of my hill, the Maltby Apiary Hill. I think we're up to the 40s. Everybody up to the 40s at night, like 45 most nights. I hope. I hope. Yeah. Yeah. And then only like 55 a day, that 10-degree difference. And then it gets really nice and they all rush out and you go, oh my goodness, it's warming. And then you realize these cleansing flights, orientation flights, they were just overdue. I have one offer. Rex Robertson, who came and talked to the club before, he was talking that when he last presented on the UBO assay, which we will try at one of the workshops, we can do 2 sessions with it. I am still looking for a volunteer that wants to take that on, explain it, and just get us all on track doing it on one work. And you can run the assay, and 2 hours later you have the results. So if you do a 3-hour in the apiary event, you can do that at the start and at the end and do something in between. And the something in between that would be ideal to do between the unhealthy brood odor assay, where you spray this odor on the brood, see if the bees know to remove it, if they are exhibiting hygienic behavior. When you're doing that, you have that 2-hour gap, you could do the other assay that is easy to do, the Harbo assay. And you actually open up brood, take a frame and take about 100, I don't know, maybe we could cut it down to 50. I don't know about opening up 100 little capped brood cells and checking to see if mites are reproducing in the cells. And it's a little more than just counting the mites. It's counting how many mites are actually fertile and actually are producing viable offspring inside, underneath the capping of that brood cell. It's an interesting, I have the article on it. It's an interesting way, and it is considered to be more accurate and more informative than the liquid nitrogen freeze brood kill assay. It's interesting. It's Harbo, Harbo assay. And I would like to just make sure everybody knows what it is. If I know some clubs, I know several people now who are talking about trying to breed a little bit for more hygienics, just in their own apiary. But I think really you'd have to do it in an area. And a couple people are talking about what if they could talk their closest beekeepers into selecting for queens whose offspring, their colonies, are showing signs of that hygienic behavior. And the UBO assay is kind of expensive. When you buy the kit, you only get like 2 vials, so you can try it on like 2 different days. And I guess what you are squirting on the brood, that is the unhealthy brood odor, that will last. So you could space that. You could do like spring and fall in the same colonies and compare. You could do it all at once and do more colonies. I'd like to do 2 workshops over here at Maltby and give people 2 chances. The Harbo assay, though, costs nothing. You just get a light, some tweezers, and the instructions, and you sit there and you score. But it requires a lot of patience. I volunteered to do it once, okay? Let's film it, do it once, and prove we did it. And it would help. It helps understand what is going on in mite reproduction and some of the strategies we should be looking at in how to get the mite populations down in our hives. Is everyone else resigned to varroa mites are like fleas? We're kind of stuck with them. If you have cats and dogs, they're going to have outbreaks every once in a while. Some are going to be more susceptible than others, side by side. If it's out of hand, you've got to do something about it chemically to get it under control. I feel like resigned. And Heidi, did you put your phone number there? I know it's in the newsletter, but just in case there's anybody here who's saying, well, I might be free some Saturdays. And these are things that aren't regular, so it is hard to get people. We need like a list of people who might be available, and it's okay to say no. I used to do a lot of volunteer contacting back. Oh, I have decades of volunteer organization and contacting, and we need a group of people so that we can take no, and we do, we take it very gracefully. But it does help to have enough people that you go, no, 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 yes, and you go, yes. Okay. Yeah, Whidbey Island does make it difficult to get over. Thank you very much. It was a nice thought, Richard, but maybe come over one time for that Harbo assay or this UBO assay. It's like $200 a kit, but I think we get 2 tries out of it, and it costs less to just buy the spray if we want to try it again next year. We have the little gun spray nozzle type thing. I think it'd be kind of fun to try. Really neat. Heidi, there, Heidi put up her cell phone just in case, and maybe not this event, but something in the future. And we have people who are only available during the weekends, only people only available during the week, people who are only available really afternoons, which sometimes, like the school things, are afternoon, are available only evenings. I know there's a full range of availability out there. It's just a matter of finding out who can do what when. And Darius, if you're on what's called Inga's iPad, thank you so much for the pictures. Those are wonderful. You caught, I'll put some of them in the presentation tomorrow night, okay? I haven't written that yet because I've been so busy reading this presentation. And I should stop recording because there's no reason to be recording any longer. I didn't think